Well, Atamari Prime Minister, day 4 in the winterless north, and it's still winterless?
Yes, indeed. So far, so good. A bit of rain expected later today.
You said it was important for you to be here for longer than a day. What are your impressions so far?
I'm incredibly pleased that we made that decision. You know, it's enabled us to spend some time, not just, of course, attending events like the welcoming on to the Upper Marae today, but to have practical meetings, to meet with those who work in health and education up here, to talk with mayors and regional council, because there is so much work to be done in the north, and we'll only really achieve the huge gains we need if we work together.
That's the Navy frigate out there that we can hear.
Just letting their presence be known.
Lovely to have them here too.
At least the horn works.
Ngāpuhi is described as the largest but the poorest iwi. So I guess, what do you think is needed to turn some of those statistics around?
And I feel that considerable weight of expectation, as does every minister in our government. And it spans across housing. We have appalling rates of Māori home ownership generally, but even the quality of the housing that we are able to access needs huge work. But equally employment, what we're doing to make sure that rangatahi young people have jobs and opportunity. So we're looking specifically at what we can do in those areas, you know, particularly here where forestry has such potential as well as tourism.
So you like that idea about the forestry that New Zealand First talks about, the development here?
Absolutely, and look, you know, it's probably one of the reasons, I'm sure, why Shane Jones is so driven by that, having seen the potential that exists here. So again, we're looking for those partnerships. A lot of our ambitions we can't deliver alone, but together I think we can.
And what are iwi saying to you? Are they open to those partnerships?
Yeah. So far, you know, really positive reception in that regard. But, you know, I fully acknowledge that they'll be waiting for us to demonstrate that we mean what we say. You know, it is one thing to come here to share, you know, the conversation and have the positive meetings. But the test, of course, will be when we stump up and demonstrate we mean it.
Yes, you were at Karetu Marae at the weekend. Ngāti Manu is their iwi, and they probably were one of the first iwi to form any kind of relationship with the Crown in the early 1800s, yet they are part of a larger group that are still to settle their treaty claim. What are they saying to you about that? Yeah,
and in fact, really almost it was back to the beginning when we were welcomed onto Karetu. They used that opportunity to share with us the history of Ngāti Manu, and that's incredibly moving. I mean, of course, you know, we know more broadly speaking the history of various iwi, but to hear that story directly from Kuia there was really powerful. And you know, although that may not have then been an individual conversation around what we can do right here and right now, actually hearing that history really shapes the way that you think about the work that we need to do as the Crown.
Well, we're in Waitangi, so I thought I'd ask you a Waitangi question. Do you think that there needs to be a treaty clause in the Kermadec Ocean Sanctuary Bill?
I certainly know that we have a lot of work to do before that the issue of the sanctuary will be resolved. You know, we were really mindful, particularly as a Labour Party, that yes, on the one hand, of course, we are very eager to see an increase in the scope of our marine sanctuaries in New Zealand. It's been one of our ambitions. But we also have the history of the foreshore and seabed legislation. And so we are proceeding with the mind that we need to resolve all of those issues as part of that sanctuary. And our view was that the last government did not get that into the right place and resolve those issues enough to be able to move forward.
So how do you do that though? So you either have a Waitangi clause or you don't?
Yeah, and that's the piece of work that we need to do, and that's what we've said both to our support partners and coalition partner as well, because they both raised this as an issue, and so we know that, and we've said that we will make sure that we work collectively to find a resolution. So we're not there yet. I want to make sure that we look at and listen, particularly to those Māori who did not feel listened to as that piece of work was done by the last government.
Is there a time frame for that?
Not at this stage, but we are here and open for that conversation starting now.
Your Māori Development Minister, Nanaia Mahuta, has indicated to the iwi leaders group, who you met with on Friday, I think, that she'd like them to change their focus away from issues like water, more towards poverty and tamariki. What does that look like? What are you asking them of?
And certainly that was part of what I used my opportunity to speak with the iwi leaders to focus on. We know that a huge part of the support that Labour received and those Māori MPs received and those Māori electorates was because we talked about housing and employment and health and what we were doing around child poverty or should do. And so that was a message we shared again. Those are our priorities. What I was heartened by is iwi leaders responded with, these are our priorities too. So straight away they'd already identified the areas where they saw that we could work together.
So when you're asking them to shift their direction, their focus, what are you actually asking them to do? Is it a financial contribution? Is it joint ventures or, MOUs with them in terms of...
Yeah. And we're open to that. I mean, they've already done a lot of thinking about the way they think whānau order can be used in that space. So that's, I'm a really practical person. I want to literally sit down and say, what does this mean in practice? But that's the conversation we're having now. That doesn't mean that some of those other issues that they've spent a long time working on are of no use now. Of course they are, but we have a really specific focus on wanting to see practical improvements in the well-being, particularly of Māori, because we know that they're overrepresented in some of those devastating statistics.
In a few hours, you're likely to make history, being the first female Prime Minister to stand on the maho in the formal ceremony at the pōwhiri there up at the marae. How are you feeling and how have you prepared yourself for that?
Do you know, I actually feel a huge weight of expectation. This is... I do feel like I'm being given the privilege of being a part of history, and how do you use that moment in time to best effect? I would like to look back on that moment and feel like I said something that was meaningful. Yes, I guess you'll have to wait and see and judge whether I do or not. I probably should go and spend some time on my speech now.
We'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Kia ora.
29 minutes past 7, that is the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern speaking with our Māori Issues correspondent Mihingarangi Forbes. Now, coming up before 8 o'clock on Morning Report, Democrats and Republicans cast out on President Donald Trump's